Hi, family. I'm so glad you're here. Today, I want us to talk about something that seems to be the way of the world, and it deserves a conversation: the issue of personal pronouns. So, grab your favorite beverage, a comfortable spot, and come join me. So, to all of my subscribers, thank you for watching. And if this is your first time to my channel, welcome. Please don't forget to like and subscribe as it keeps this channel going. I came across an article on the issue of personal pronouns from a Christian perspective. And I found this at gotquestions.org. Now, perhaps you've been asked the question, what is your preferred pronoun? If you're not familiar with personal pronouns, they're words such as he, him, his, she, her, and hers. Now, the article goes on to say that in some situations, those who wish to identify as the opposite of their biological sex prefer to be spoken of using pronouns that correspond to their preference, not their biology. For example, a male who self-identifies as female might ask to be referred to as she or her. Beyond this, some persons claim to be completely different genders or combinations of genders. Such persons might ask to be referred to using pronouns such as they or them, or even new words. And I can't pronounce these, so I'm going to spell them out. One is XI, XIM, or XER. And I don't want to offend anybody, but there's so many terms and terminologies that it can be confusing. I know it is for me. So the article poses this question: does that mean a Christian can or should use preferred pronouns even just to be polite? Or should believers make a point of not using such terms at all to avoid endorsing something untrue? Now, I'm going to be going between what the article is saying and my personal comments. And whenever I do that, I'm going to let you know. So right now, this is coming from me. Now, this is an issue that has come up for me as a believer. I believe the Bible to be true, that we are created, as the Bible says, to be what we were born as biologically. Now, please do not think I'm homophobic or a hater of anyone, because I want to make it absolutely clear that I am not. That type of mentality would keep me out of the favor of God. Now, the article says, as with many specific issues, the Bible does not give an explicit word-for-word answer. There is no thou shalt or thou shalt not for the use of modern preferred pronouns. What believers can do is look for guiding principles in order to make the best choice in a given situation. Now, this article is powerful, and I know you've heard me use that before, but it really is. I believe that whoever wrote this was hearing my thoughts, speaking to my emotions, and I really thought that it was something we can talk about. In short, while Christians need to be careful and respectful, respect cannot extend to endorsing ideas that the Bible calls false. Whatever choice a Christian makes with respect to preferred pronouns, it's important that they not give the appearance of endorsing sin or self-deception. At the same time, believers ought to tread lightly on any issue that touches on sensitive emotions. Now, this is me talking. That's important because according to the Bible, we must always speak the truth in love. So the article goes on and it says, some Christians may conclude that preferred pronouns are simply not an option. Embracing those terms rather than factually accurate pronouns is to speak or write in ways that agree with something false. And they reference Isaiah 5:20. The person in question, in reality, is a member of a particular gender, not whatever gender he or she prefers or feels. Now, and again, I want you to note, I'm reading from the article. These are not my words. As such, using pronouns that imply something else is at least inaccurate and might be construed as dishonest, hypocritical, or a rejection of biblical ideas. Now, I want to preface and say, again, as I'm reading from this article, I don't want anyone to say she said or this is what Alberta is endorsing or anything like that. I don't want you to say it in that way, but what you can say is that I believe what this article is saying. I truly attest to what it's saying as a believer in Christ. So if you do say anything, you can say that. Now, the article goes on to say other Christians might conclude that refusing to use preferred pronouns would be the equivalent of constantly voicing disapproval, leading to added stress or conflict. Here again, I say we must speak the truth in love, which is what the Bible tells us to do. Now, from that standpoint, believers might decide that pronouns are not an issue about which they need to fall on their swords, especially in cases of professional or personal relationships. Believers may feel that it's best to pick their battles rather than take a rigid stance on such terms. It goes on to say, of course, since this is not a black and white issue, Christians might find themselves varying between both of these options. Now, I'm going to give you what those options are again. And those options are to use the pronouns as not to be disrespectful, or to take the hard stance of not using them at all, depending on the circumstances. Again, this is so powerful. Christians ought to consider at least three major themes when it comes to the issue of preferred pronouns. One, respect for all persons. We want to be respectful. Personal relationships. You want to consider the relationship. And number three, speaking the truth, which is what I said before, speaking the truth in love. Now, beyond these themes, the article says, it's useful to understand the difference between personal pronouns and personal names, secular concerns with this issue, and the use of gendered pronouns with respect to God. So what I like is that the article breaks it up in order of those three items: respect for all persons, personal relationships, and speaking the truth. So I'm not going to read the whole article. I will link it below, but I want to highlight some of the items under those three things. Respect for all persons. So it says, even when disagreeing about an important issue, believers must act in gentleness and with respect. And it referenced 1 Peter 3:15. Rebuke and condemnation have their place. Proverbs 27:5 and Titus 1:9. But when a person is sincere and seeking, mercy is supposed to be the guiding principle. Jude 1:22. So no matter how a Christian chooses to handle the issue of preferred pronouns, it's imperative to do so in as gentle and peaceable a way as possible. And they reference Romans 12:18. So now we're going to move over to number 2, which is personal relationships. As with many issues, one's approach to these issues is affected by context and audience. So referring to a third person, such as a celebrity who is not present, is markedly different from having a face-to-face conversation with a coworker or a family member. This is part of being wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Matthew 10:16. Be careful and sensitive to those who are hearing or reading one's words. So you really want to be careful when you make a comment on this issue. Number 2, speaking truth. From a spiritual and scriptural standpoint, then The literal intent behind preferred pronouns is unbiblical. Men are not women and vice versa. Other than a tiny percentage of persons who are biologically intersexed and deserving of special consideration, there are no third, fourth, fifth, etc. genders, nor any basis for a person to choose such a thing. For the same reason that believers ought not pretend that other faiths offer salvation, and they reference John 14:6, or that other gods are real, 1 John 4:1, or that something sinful is morally right, Isaiah 5:20. Many believers conclude that it's immoral to enable the basic premise behind the use of preferred pronouns. Equally important to consider is the believer's primary mission to reach lost people for the sake of Christ. 1 Corinthians 1:17, 2 Corinthians 4:3. Part of reaching them is sharing the love of Christ. And that goes back to when I said, I am not a hater of anyone, nor should any Christian be. Reaching them is sharing the love of Christ. As unfair and inappropriate as it might be for someone to demand other people use words they prefer, unbelievers cannot be expected to think and feel like believers. 1 Corinthians 2:14. Conceding the use of preferred pronouns, some Christians would argue, is a form of going the extra mile. Matthew 5:39-42. So long as it's clear we're using such words as gestures of respect and not in agreement. Now, moving to the very last item, pronouns versus names. Personal names are different from personal pronouns. Now, that's key. Names are an indication of which particular person, place, or thing is being discussed. Pronouns, on the other hand, imply what that person, place, or thing is. Certain names might be culturally unusual, but using the name a person prefers is not in the same category as using the pronoun a person prefers. That's powerful. That's powerful. For example, if a person's name is Charles, he might prefer to be called Chuck, or as a nickname such as Ace or Slim. Actors and entertainers often use a stage name professionally. In this way, it's arguable that the use of names in modern culture is merely to identify the particular person, not to define them. So if Chuck wants to be called Betty, on the other hand, that might be odd, but it's not the same as actually saying Chuck is female. Powerful. Then again, one could argue that using a preferred name chosen because it corresponds to a preferred gender is also a form of enablement. Now that's something to think on. Secular concerns. Forcing people to use preferred pronouns would literally be a coercion of speech. Demanding that others use such terms implies that you have a right for other people to speak or write in ways that agree with you. That's something to think on. Again, Christians should weigh a reasonable need to contend for truth, Jude 1:3, with a command to be accommodating to others when appropriate, Matthew 5:41. The article ends with something called complications of the fall, and that goes back to the beginning of time. Human sin has resulted in a falling world, Romans 5:12. That sin, by its nature, confuses and complicates issues that God has otherwise made clear, Romans 1:21-22. Unfortunately, issues such as preferred pronouns create difficult choices for Christians. I told you in the beginning that this article spoke for me because I found it a little bit difficult as to how I would deal with this preferred pronoun issue. While followers of Christ want to be loving, caring, and peaceful, 1 Corinthians 13, it is also important to obey God rather than men, Acts 5:29. And that includes speaking truth in love, Ephesians 4:15, rather than shrinking from controversy for the sake of social comfort, Hebrews 10:23, and 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Finally, where the balance of those concerns falls in any given moment is something for each believer to prayerfully and carefully consider. And that's something that I am doing, and hopefully you will do the same. I hope that this was helpful for you if you struggle a little bit with what to do with this new way of the world, this new preferred pronoun issue. Hopefully this will be helpful to you. Again, I'm going to link the full article below. So that's all I have for you today. I hope that you will like and subscribe. And as always, be you, do you, and love the life you live right now.